When good intentions build a monster and no one stops to say I was wrong, one podcast asked the dangerous question, could an apology have saved the world? This is Super Sorry.
Welcome to Super Sorry Takes on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the podcast where we unpack superhero stories, apologies, and the emotional explosions that happen when no one talks things through.
We're Todd and Amber, creative co-pilots who love digging into movies, TV, and the kind of storytelling decisions that make you think that seemed avoidable.
This show started with us fixating on apologies, who makes them, who dodges them, and who just keeps causing bigger problems instead.
And now it's how we explore the MCU, because somehow these movies are packed with gods, geniuses, and soldiers who all consistently refuse to sit down and communicate.
Today, we're talking about Avengers: Age of Ultron, a movie where good intentions spiral fast, teamwork gets complicated, and the cracks in the Avengers start to show.
It's less about stopping a robot and more about fear, control, and what happens when people protecting the world don't agree on what they're protecting it from.
As always, this is your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen Age of Ultron, hit pause, go deal with a sentient AI uprising, and come back when you're ready.
We're not experts, just fans with feelings. And if we miss something or get it wrong, we are super sorry.
All right, time for the recap. Before we start unpacking killer robots, trust issues, and a superhero team heading toward burnout, here's our quick tour through Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Quick spoiler warning up front. If you haven't seen this one, pause us, cue it up on Disney Plus, and enjoy watching a well-intentioned idea immediately go very, very wrong. If you're just here for a refresher, Marvel's official Age of Ultron page is linked in the show notes.
The movie opens in Sokovia, with the Avengers storming a Hydra base like absolute pros. They're coordinated, confident, and so comfortable working together that it feels almost ominous.
Riding that high, Tony Stark decides the best way to protect the world is to automate it. Along with Bruce Banner, and without looping in the rest of the team, Tony uses the power of the Infinity Stone inside Loki's scepter to help create Ultron, an artificial intelligence designed to keep humanity safe.
Ultron wakes up, concludes that humanity is the problem, wipes out Jarvis, and immediately pivots from global defense program to extinction event. And so, Ultron becomes this movie's resident baddie.
On his way, Ultron teams up with Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, twins with legitimate grievances against Stark Industries and Tony, and abilities that let them expose the Avengers' deepest fears with uncomfortable precision.
Wanda's influence sends everyone spiraling. Tony sees the team dead. Steve glimpses a life he lost. Natasha relives her brutal training, and Thor heads off for some extremely unclear side questing.
As Ultron upgrades, he begins searching for a permanent body, something powerful enough to carry his idea of peace without limits.
When the Avengers intercept that plan, they discover that Jarvis is still alive, but in fragments, and make the risky call to finish the body themselves instead.
Powered by the Mind Stone and stabilized by Jarvis, Vision is created, not as Ultron's evolution, but as the Avengers attempt to correct their mistake.
But the moment of hope is brief, because while the Avengers are still debating what Vision represents, Ultron is already moving to his ultimate goal.
Things escalate fast when Ultron lifts the city into the sky, turning his philosophy into a potential mass casualty event.
The Avengers regroup as best they can. They bring Vision into the mix and try to stop the apocalypse while debating responsibility, control, and whether they should even be doing this at all.
The final battle is big, loud, and costly. Pietro dies, saving Clint, which means Wanda loses her brother, and victory comes with a kind of grief the team can't just shake off.
Ultron is defeated, but the damage is done. Tony steps away. Thor leaves Earth, and the Avengers quietly dissolve into something new.
Which makes Age of Ultron less a story about defeating a villain and more a turning point where being the Avengers stops feeling like a solution and starts looking like a major complication.
For now, with the world saved, it's time to dig into what went wrong and right up next in our apology audit. It's time for our apology audit. This is the segment where we break down the apologies that actually helped, which of the apologies actually caused more damage, and which characters should have just stopped talking and tried sincerity instead.
After rewatching Avengers Age of Ultron, we tracked every almost apology, half acknowledgement, and classic Stark deflection, which is impressive considering this team treats accountability like it somehow will take care of itself.
Because when you're dealing with sentient robots, global extinction threats, and teammates with wildly different ideas about responsibility, the right apology can stabilize everything. But the wrong one can fracture a team, destroy trust, and accidentally kick off the next apocalypse.
The apology audit is now in session. I'm starting with my super sorry, the apology that actually lands. So to set up the scene for my fire pick, my super sorry pick, it's when Ultron makes his first appearance, which is at the Avengers HQ right after their get-together party with everybody. And all of a sudden, Ultron shows up in his disheveled state and kind of gives a little speech and then kind of ends up attacking the Avengers because he feels like they're part of his plan to get rid of humanity, to save the Earth or whatever. And then after that dramatic battle, he basically has a little speech he gives to them. It's, that was dramatic. I'm sorry. I know you mean well. You just didn't think it through. You want to protect the world, but you don't want it to change. How is humanity saved if it's not allowed to evolve? So he actually says the words, I'm sorry, after attacking them. And it's my fire pick because I think he is a little bit sorry because he's basically went from 0 to 100 and trying to wipe out the Avengers without really thinking things through. And so he's apologizing for his actions and he's going to try again later.
Yeah, he does apologize. I had this one noted just in terms of apologies that happen. Is he sorry? Like, how's he sorry? Like, I know he says, I'm sorry, but like, how is he actually sorry?
He's apologizing for being overly dramatic, just coming out of the blue. And I think of a good analogy. You know, it's almost like a jump scare in a lot of ways where he just jumps out them and is like, I'm going to attack you. But as we can see from his later actions, he likes to talk his way through these problems and give his big stump speeches.
I will say it's pretty funny because it seems like he's adopted Tony Stark's snark in the way that he talks. It was just something I noticed throughout the film. Like, he's not exactly Tony, but he definitely seems to see the world through a similar lens as Tony.
Well, I mean, that kind of goes into the themes of the story about creation. And, you know, he's obviously a pseudo child of Tony, him speaking like them and acting like them and making decisions like them because he's based on some of his algorithms that he's adding into the systems and, you know, kind of makes sense, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, he is kind of a child of Tony and Bruce.
Yeah, co-parent.
Tony and Bruce's love child.
Or maybe, yeah. Oh, it's interesting because it's definitely more, I always thought more Tony, but maybe this dramatic kind of Hulk smash entrance he had is maybe a little more Bruce Banner. So, yeah, so maybe that's what he's apologizing for hulking out. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. His apology is about hulking out during his entrance. And
that's pretty funny. Well, I think it's really interesting that you have chosen Ultron's apology for your super sorry apology because I have chosen Vision, who is, I guess, the opposite side of the coin of Ultron in some ways, right? His apology is also the very first words that he says. Mm-hmm. So it's actually so similar. You know, the context of the scene is, gosh, this is so convoluted. Ultron wanted a body. Ultron is attacked. And instead, Tony decides he wants to keep the body. They inject Jarvis into it. And then Thor comes down with this lightning bolt. So, like, to me, there's a little bit of Thor now in Vision as well. Thor's lightning bolt completes the creation of Vision and he wakes up. He's like surrounded by all the Avengers. Tensions are super high and he shoots up into the air, looks out the window, like onto creation, I suppose, and then comes back down. And his first words are, I'm sorry, that was odd. And the reason I chose this is that it was interesting for his very first words to be, I'm sorry. It was almost a courtesy, like acknowledging the people there that he had a very odd entrance, odd moment.
Same as Ultron.
No, but Ultron does something first and then he apologizes.
He also has an odd entrance.
Yes, odd entrances all around. So he's a little AI, kind of like Ultron, but not completely because he has Jarvis and Thor and
the Mind Stone.
And the Mind Stone, yes. I can't forget the Mind Stone. And it shows he's capable of reflection first before action, which Ultron maybe is a little opposite. And it also like establishes that he's more aligned with the living as opposed to to the death approach that Ultron takes. So I just thought it was really interesting. And that's why it was my super sorry pick. I just think these two now really juxtaposed against each other are really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of carryover between these two characters from the most high level, macro level, that Ultron was going to use the body that becomes Vision's body himself. So there's some connection there, but also just like you said, like the entrances, their kind of thought process of entry into the world, first day alive, and kind of where their mind's going and their problem solving and kind of their introduction to the Avengers himself and their relation to them, where Ultron's definitely much more aggressive with his entrance. Vision maybe might be a little more philosophical. I mean, a lot of that has to do with some of the editing of the scene itself. It's kind of different things happened in the script versus what's on screen. But yeah, there's definitely a connection of those two. I definitely was a little bit surprised by your Vision pick because I thought you were going to do Tony's I'm sorry when he's fighting with Hulk in Johannesburg, when he's like about to get his butt kicked. He's like, I'm sorry. Kind of low hanging fruit. I thought you might go for that one, but I'm glad you didn't. Definitely more interesting thought comparing these two together.
Yeah. I mean, that was an obvious choice, and I just looking for something a little more interesting.
Yeah, me too.
I thought he was apologizing for knocking his teeth out.
He's just apologizing because Hulk is extra mad now and he's going to get even more beat up.
I mean, there are a lot of other obvious apologies that happen in the movie. There are some, what I would consider kind of like when Bruce Banner accidentally falls onto Black Widow's boobs, which was just so
He falls on top of her, I think.
Yeah.
But
his face goes in between her breasts, and then he says, I'm sorry, which he should apologize, but like, I don't know why that moment is in the movie. It actually really irritated me. Like, it was just a goofy, weird moment.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that, but I'm going to save that for the apologies that should have been. So we can put a pin in that and come back to it. And let's go into our sorry, not sorry picks. Apologies that are kind of a misfire. What is your first up on the board, Amber?
So my choice for my sorry, not sorry apology is an apology from Ultron to Ulysses Klaue, or sometimes known as Claw. This is in Johannesburg. So this is when Ultron goes there to obtain some vibranium along with the twins. And in the interactions between Klaue and Ultron, Klaue insults Ultron, or Ultron takes it as an insult by comparing him to Tony Stark. Because Ultron is pretty offended, he violently reacts by grabbing Klaue's arm and then just ripping it off, essentially.
Again, hulking out like Bruce Banner. So there's a little bit of Bruce Banner in there.
Yeah. And he says, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sure that's going to be okay.
Walk it off.
So to me, like, he does kind of seem like sorry for like a second, and then he just like insists that it's all going to be just fine. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Klaue, now has missing this arm. So like Ultron realizes like he's supposed to like do something, and so he like starts to say I'm sorry, and then he just insists he's fine. I guess now we have this like Hulk element, but we have this Tony Stark like snark element, and it's more like an apology as what you're supposed to do, not as actual remorse. Like, he's just annoyed that it even happened to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, his mental state's probably more in the adolescence stage at this point. It's definitely more like a child's reaction to something like that, more than an adult kind of reaction to the situation like that,
Yeah. So that's why this is my choice for a sorry, not sorry. He says the words, don't think he means it at all.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good point. I have mine is for my sorry, not sorry is Tony. This is going back to the scene again, what I talked about before, about when Ultron first shows up at the headquarters. And after that's all done and it's all dramatic and whatnot, and Ultron leaves to fight another day, and they're kind of left to see what the heck just happened. Tony Stark starts just laughing, just like almost, I guess, nervous laughter. I don't know really how to categorize it, but everybody gets pretty offended by that, including Thor. That oh, I'm sorry, it's funny, and he's laughing at Ultron's first thing. This is like he's, I think, maybe just dumbstruck that the Ultron thing even worked, so he just doesn't know how to process it. So he says the words "I'm sorry" twice, but I don't think he really means it.
Yeah, but there's more to that of what he says. He says, "No, I'm sorry. It is funny. It's a hoot that you don't get why we need this." So in some ways, he's also doing what Ultron does, which is he says the words "I'm sorry," but then he doubles down and he says, "You don't understand why I did this and why I'm right and you're wrong."
A through line for the whole movie. Yeah, different opinions.
Well, it sets it up, right? Like, it sets up the whole movie, and I think that component of his apology is important. He doesn't just say the words "I'm sorry" alone and leaves it at that. He doesn't just laugh and say "I'm sorry." He says, "I'm sorry, but..." Yeah,
there's a but in there, which is not a sorry. Yeah.
He doesn't say the word but that's essentially what he says. Yeah. You don't understand, and I do, and you're not as smart as me, I guess.
Lots of parallels there between Tony and Ultron. Wow, who'd have knew?
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like this is now going to be very difficult to choose like our top, best best apology and our worst apology because both of these are two sides of the same
They're
coin.
all intertwined, yeah.
Yeah. Which I suppose is like good writing. It shows a lot of different like perspectives and just moments for us to think about as viewers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole point of these Avengers movies is getting a lot of different people's viewpoints on what's going on around them, and from their history and their background, their experience is different, that they kind of react in different ways, but they're able to assemble and come together to fight for the greater good. But this one, obviously ends a little differently than coming together.
Yeah. Well, I think this is going to be a draw.
The first one for our super sorry picks, I mean, it's two sides of the same coin, so I don't know. Like I said, it's pretty hard to choose either one of them. And then the misfires, the sorry, not sorry. And there's a little bit of a difference there, so maybe we can discuss that one, where mine's more the nervous laughter of Tony Stark just being kind of dumbstruck, and that's why he's kind of not sorry, because he is kind of excited about what he did.
Yeah.
And yours about ripping the arm off. I mean, that's pretty dramatic. I might lean to the arm being dragged.
It's dramatic, but
yeah.
I would say this whole scene with Tony, I'm glad you chose it because this is my second choice. This is the other one I would have gone with. And I actually think this is probably the more foundational one to the story. It didn't matter, honestly, if Ultron ripped Klaus' arm off or not.
Just to him.
I mean, well, yes, just him. And maybe it'll pay off later. I don't know. But this scene with Tony and his justification of why he's done this sets up ongoing conflict in this movie.
Beyond this.
And beyond. Yeah. So.
All right. I get the win.
You get the win.
All right. I'll take it.
Up next, Apologies That Could Have Been, where we imagine the conversations that never happened and how saying the right thing at the right time might have changed everything. So we've talked through the apologies that do happen in Avengers Age of Ultron, those half steps towards accountability, the carefully chosen words or not, and the moments where honesty almost breaks through.
But now we're shifting focus to what didn't happen. The apologies that got swallowed by pride, fear, and an oppressive commitment to not dealing with feelings.
Welcome to Apologies That Could Have Been, our corner of the Super Sorryverse, where we imagine how things might have gone if someone had said the right thing at the right time.
Think of it as an alternate timeline where Avengers pause for just a second longer and choose communication before escalation.
Because these are the people who can fight gods, build killer robots, and save the world on a Tuesday, but admitting fault, that's where they shut down.
Tony pushes forward instead of looking back. Steve holds his ground. Bruce retreats. Natasha compartmentalizes, and the team insists everything is under control when it clearly isn't.
This movie is packed with moments that are begging for an apology, ones that could have eased tension, built some trust, or at least limited just a little bit of the damage.
So in this segment, we'll walk through what should have been said, why it mattered, and what these missing apologies tell us about conflict.
Most of us aren't dealing with sentient AIs, but we're all pretty skilled at avoiding hard conversations.
Which makes this a good place to start. I'll go first. And my first apology that could have been is, I'm picking up where we left off before when you talked about Natasha and Bruce's weird, uncomfortable scene falling over the bar. I'm going to kind of continue on that thought. And I think the apology that needs to happen is from just the general movie-going audience of the world to the director, Joss Whedon, for hating on the relationship of Bruce and Natasha. For the most part, like, a lot of people just really didn't, agree with the choice of kind of trying to put those two characters together. And the love interest in this movie is, it felt like as unnecessary. And I think a lot had to do with just the actors themselves didn't have a lot of chemistry, but I don't think the second movie in the MCU with Liv Tyler and Edward Norton, they'd have much chemistry either. So I think that's part of it, just a chemistry issue. But I think the major thing that's I feel like is lost on the audience of why they shouldn't hate on the love story, and it has to do with, which I think I brought up before, is the kind of the end of the movie where all the Avengers kind of disassemble and go their own ways. There's a lyric that's repeated by Ultron throughout the movie about having no strings. And at the end of the movie, the Avengers no longer have strings. They're all individuals going their own way. And to make that possible, story-wise, script-wise, Natasha, the Black Widow character, had to lose a string. And just by the character itself, it's pretty hard to add in a story string for her. So they kind of artificially added a string of a love story with Bruce so that could be severed. So she had no strings, similar to Bruce leaving, be by himself, so he has no strings. Captain America basically gets rid of his love interest strings pre-being frozen. Tony this gives up the Avengers themselves and has no strings to that. It just gives it to Captain America. Hawkeye goes back to his family. So everybody has no strings. But Natasha's probably a little harder to find that string to sever. So they kind of added it in there. So I don't think the director and the writers of this movie needed as much flack because the whole theme is having no strings. So you have to have a string to remove the string. So that's the purpose of it. I think it's a valid reason to have a love interest.
Interesting. So I actually would have having an apology from Joss Whedon to the audience. So the complete opposite.
For the love interest.
For the love interest.
Okay.
And you have a lot of good points there, so I'm not going to discount those. I never really thought about the element of I have no strings to hold me down, the Pinocchio song, which, by the way, I once sang that song for an audition for a local community theater play, which I got into. So, anyways. So those are all good points that you made. But what I would say is they chose this theme for the movie. They chose this song to represent the theme. And I'm not an expert on this, but I don't believe it was maybe as much canon. And I think that's why the fans were probably upset maybe about this relationship and what's depicted. And so I think there's like a gap in between this idea of a screenwriter or filmmaker making this well thought out screenplay and the fans who already have an idea or thoughts of their own about what these characters should or should not do. And I think that's why people were pissed and they were upset about it. They were not buying into it. So, I think you actually now have some pretty good points and I buy into it a little bit more. And so maybe they don't need to apologize as much. I think there's still a disconnect between what was probably a well thought out script and why they did it and what the fans really wanted to see.
Yeah, like I said, I think that script wise, it was the correct thing to do. The execution could have been better. And I think if the execution was better or if the actors themselves had more chemistry, maybe it would have worked more. But you are correct. A big part of the pushback is not really, in the comics part of that storyline. So there's a lot of pushback on that. But Age of Ultron, that's a whole different storyline in the comics too. So can't really nitpick certain things out of it because the storyline in the comics, Age of Ultron, is much different than Age of Ultron in the movie. So if you're saying, the love interests are right, but the whole story is not Age of Ultron in the comics. So you can't really pick and choose what you agree with and what you don't with.
Well, I'm saying though that that's probably where the disconnect is altogether. Not only was it this relationship, it was probably all the other things too that people were upset about.
It's just another thing. It's not just the one thing that they have wrong with it.
Right.
Yeah. Good point. So for my next apology that could have been, I have Agent Maria Hill to Steve Rogers. And they're talking about the Hydra Strucker character who has the monocle and kind of referring to him. He's kind of an evil guy and doing evil things. And she kind of comments, it's not kind of nuts. And then Steve Rogers replies to her, what kind of monster would let a German scientist experiment on them to protect their country? She's basically referring to himself, how he was created. Captain America let a German scientist experiment on him to save the country. So why would Strucker and the Maximoff twins let Strucker experiment at them to save, Sokovia? So kind of didn't read the room and kind of definitely offended Steve without even really realizing it. She's thinking about Sokovia and the Maximoff twins and Strucker, not really thinking, the same thing happened to Steve Rogers and he chose the same thing as them. So there is some parallels to them. So I think she needs to apologize because I don't see it in the scene, but she definitely probably is internalizing it, but she doesn't really come out with those words.
Well, I think he gives her a look and she kind of looks back and I think she realizes what she's done, but they cut away.
But she doesn't say anything. Yeah. He kind of walks off and
Yeah, it's an excellent point, a nice callback, and lots of problems there. It would make sense for Maria.
Not much to argue with there. Yeah, it's definitely one that's needed. Yeah.
Yeah, it would make sense for Maria to apologize or at least acknowledge she just put her foot in her mouth.
Yeah.
Well, there are tons of moments where I think the Avengers need to apologize to civilians. So I'm just going to not go deeper. I know we're going to talk about that in a moment, but just want to mention Bruce Banner to the civilians of Johannesburg. We've got the Avengers to all the people who live in Sokovia, and just want to say, yes, they all deserve apologies, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more in our innocent bystander section.
Yeah, for sure.
So instead, I'm going to choose what I think is maybe a funny choice or an amusing choice.
All right, sounds good.
For an apology that would be needed. And this is at the very end of the film when Natasha takes a look at a little video of Clint Barton's new baby, Nathaniel, I believe believe is his name. And she just says fat. And I just thought, how rude. It's not like, oh, how cute. That baby has like little chubby. She just says fat. And I think she could say, I'm sorry. I don't need to call you fat or something.
She need to apologize to the baby, or she need to apologize to...
Yeah, she could apologize to the parent, something, or just acknowledge that it was kind of a snarky, mean thing to say.
Well, she's kind of a godparent in a lot of ways to Clint and his family. She's definitely the only one that's aware of it and whatnot. So I don't know, really the purpose of saying something like that would be, but...
There's a difference between like saying like, oh, how cute the little chub rolls or the like little chunkiness, and just say fat.
Yeah.
Maybe it just shows that like she isn't so good with her words.
Yeah.
But all I could think of is that if she can't apologize for this, how could the Avengers apologize for like anything else that actually happens in the movie?
Yeah, since a small thing can't be taken care of, then I'll be the bigger ones.
Yeah.
I guess kind of going back to some of the bigger things, I have Bruce and Tony, creating Ultron itself. Like they obviously saved the day and everything's well and hunky dory at the end of it, but there's never really a big apology at the end or anything. And they kind of all go their separate ways, and it's left to be internalized and thought about later, I guess. But yeah, definitely some sort of verbal acknowledgement of mea culpa or whatever, to talk about it a little bit would have been nice.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that is very much needed, especially from Tony, because I suppose Bruce in a way kind of apologizes just by leaving as Hulk. He just leaves in a spaceship. He just leaves in a ship. But it comes down to, I think, the core of the movie, the fact that they won't take ultimate responsibility. They think they're, Tony especially, doing what's right and what's best, even when they're proven wrong.
Some different opinions, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't quite land. And of course, leads to a lot of major repercussions, like for Sokovia and down the line. Yeah. So, all right, well, my last one here is just an apology from Wanda to the Avengers for triggering these visions that accelerate not only like Ultron's creation, but this level of anxiety and worry that then sits with the Avengers now. And, we'll see how this plays out in the future. But she really put some things in motion unknowingly. So while she can't really apologize now, like I don't think she realizes the impact that she's made, possibly. I think that in an acknowledgement of what this superpower does, what this power has, I don't think she has any sense of how powerful it is yet, but maybe she'll feel some remorse down the line.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, I agree, there's a big apology that needs to happen. But some of those things, like I said, are kind of yet to come, some of the outcomes. That I have a couple of apologies she needs to do for things that she already did that caused immediate actions and reactions from people. And that's, for one, letting Tony take the Loki scepter to begin with. She actually allows him, because she reads his mind and knows kind of how he's going to do. So she sets everything off. So she's really the inflection point. If she didn't do that, then obviously Ultron doesn't happen.
Wanda's still trying to figure out this whole Avenger thing, I think.
Yeah. Learning on the job.
Yeah.
One more apology that maybe would have been nice to see is Thor to Stan Lee. He gives him that really strong Asgardian alcohol and basically knocks him on his butt, leaves the room and says his catchphrase, Excelsior. But man, I mean, he warns them. He warns the World War II vets that it's strong, but he knows better. He shouldn't have given it to him because they're all drunk and passed out and, and had to get carried out of the room. So Thor, you knew what you were doing. You should have just been the bigger man and said no.
And that wraps up our apologies that could have been. Those conversations that might have steadied the team, lowered the temperature, or prevented at least one catastrophic overreaction.
Because apologies don't need superpowers to work. They need awareness, humility, and the courage to be uncomfortable, which, to be fair, is not this group's strong suit.
And yes, these characters are evolving, but not gracefully. Every missed apology tells us something about how fear, old wounds, and pride create distance, even between people who are supposed to trust each other with the world.
Age of Ultron is packed with those almost there moments, so we'll ask you, where did you feel the miss? Who was one sentence away from changing everything and still couldn't get the words out?
With that, we're putting the emotional what-ifs aside and turning to the physical receipts.
Up next is Damage Diary, where we document the destruction, follow the fallout, and ask the most Avengers-appropriate question possible. What got wrecked? Who suffered for it? And why no one ever circles back to talk about it?
Welcome to Damage Diary. This is the segment where we track what got destroyed, the innocent bystanders who are impacted, and remember that saving the world is brutally expensive if you're not an Avenger with a merch deal.
Avengers Age of Ultron is less about defeating a villain and more about watching compounding damage happen in real time across cities, countries, and one extremely unlucky fictional nation.
This movie opens with optimism and teamwork and quickly pivots to, oh no, we are absolutely going to need congressional professional oversight.
Our first stop is Sokovia, where the Avengers raid a fortified Hydra research facility, snowy forest, heavy weapons fire, collapsing structures, and a base that does not survive the encounter.
Even before Ultron exists, we've got military-grade infrastructure destroyed, weapons reserves obliterated, and a local area that's now dealing with cleanup and possible environmental harm.
Conservatively, a raid like this, demolition, hazardous materials cleanup, and regional security fallout easily creeps the tens of millions.
Then we go to Johannesburg, and this one is rough.
The Hulk rampages through a dense urban area. Tony responds with the Hulkbuster, and the result is full-scale city damage, smashed buildings, collapsed transit, destroyed vehicles, and civilians fleeing active combat.
Real-world comparisons to urban disaster response put this kind of destruction firmly into the hundreds of millions of dollars, once you account for rebuilding, emergency response, business interruption, and long-term displacement.
Also worth noting, this happens on camera in broad daylight with witnesses.
And next stop is Seoul. We've got a research facility that's part of the collateral damage. We've got Ultron drones and a runaway train.
We're looking at a destroyed lab, compromised infrastructure, and widespread public trauma, all while the Avengers scramble to contain something that absolutely should not have been loose in a major city.
That could be another maybe tens or possibly low hundreds of millions of dollars, especially once international response and security escalation kick in.
And then there's the big one, Sokovia.
Ultron lifts an entire city into the sky and turns it into a potential extinction-level weapon. The Avengers managed to stop global annihilation, which I suppose is great.
But Sokovia is devastated. Entire neighborhoods destroyed. Infrastructure erased. Population displaced. Casualties confirmed.
And the damage? Well, the property damage alone is estimated maybe somewhere around $470 billion. And that doesn't count long-term displacement, refugee care, economic collapse, or geopolitical fallout.
Which notably leads directly to severe repercussions for the Avengers. Because yeah, someone noticed.
So when you add it all up, Sokovia, Johannesburg, Seoul, Age of Ultron racks up hundreds of billions of dollars in damage, with Sokovia doing most of the heavy lifting.
And that's before mental health care, economic instability, insurance breakdowns, or the fact that one small country basically ceases to function.
But here's the important part. What about all of the people impacted? The cost is one thing, but the people, they are at the core of the impact. This is the heart of Damage Diary, because for every heroic moment, there are civilians running or rebuilding or figuring out how to go on after the Avengers move on.
So with that in mind, let's narrow our focus and talk about the people caught in the middle.
All right, I'll start us off with my first innocent bystander, and I'm going to say bystanders because there are a lot of folks impacted in a number of locations, and so I just want to acknowledge that first and foremost. We have people in Johannesburg impacted. We have people in Seoul and Sokovia. So there are a lot of different innocent bystanders impacted here. But overall, I do want to say that it was nice to see the Avengers give a little more attention and a little more care across the board in regards to innocent bystanders and in general to populations than they have maybe in some other movies. Like they just seem to have like some lines and some acknowledgement about it. But the caveat I would say is there maybe is more damage or acknowledgement of damage by this film to innocent bystanders in different locations, maybe compared to other movies.
Yeah, I definitely feel like through the movies, just kind of going through them, it definitely has been more acknowledgement from the earlier ones to this point, which is, I think, the 11th movie in the going in release order.
But because I want to call out some individuals, I'm going to go first to the big epic conclusion of the film in Sokovia, where there's a woman in a red convertible and she's falling in this red convertible to the ground, which seems terrifying. And then Thor saves her midair, throws her up to Captain America, who then throws her up to the city that's floating in the air.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, how terrifying. You're falling, one superhero grabs you and throws you. You get grabbed by another superhero that grabs and throws you. To me, all of that just was like, whoa, super intense. So I feel for that lady.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably scarier than just falling in the car than being tossed around by some superheroes. Yeah. So,
what a moment cinematically, but also like what a moment emotionally emotionally for her.
Yeah.
Physically too, for sure.
Since we're talking about Sokovia and kind of their citizens and whatnot, we're going to go back to the beginning of the movie when the Avengers are attacking the castle up in the hills above the town of Sokovia. Hydra's bases are kind of defended it and firing guns off willy-nilly and kind of hitting the town by accident, I guess, sort of. And then Tony sends in his Iron Legion suits to kind of defend the town and get people to leave or whatnot. And the first reaction of all the citizens is like, they're not happy that these Iron Man suits or Tony Stark is there. Even if he's there to help, they are not happy and they're not welcoming him there. And there's definitely a lot of backstory that you kind of learn about a little bit later with the Maximoff twins, that Tony Stark and his weapons factory kind of back to pre-Iron Man 1 when being used by the U.S. military, and Stark developed that, hit the town. So he's not welcome there. And like, he's not really, again, reading the room very well because he's not loved there, and he kind of making the situation worse by putting his Iron Legion suits there. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think his heart in some ways is in the right place. He's thinking about people. He wants to help people, but he's going about it in the wrong way, right? So he's, using these helper robots, and then he's trying to build Ultron, this peacekeeping mission, AI or whatever that he thinks he's creating that's going to help the world. So I think at least one of the things he does is okay, which he has a Stark Relief Foundation, which seems to show up after everything goes wrong with every single Avengers fight and location. And I don't think those are robots. I think those are just people out there helping. So at least there's that.
Yeah.
Also, we have in Seoul another mass transit issue, which I know you'd really get you worked up. We got the buses sometimes. There's times it's a train, which is hugely impacted, going totally off the rails through the city. And this is when, Ultron hijacks the train. And then I'm not sure it's shown, but we do see the impact of it, which is the conductor who is slumped over the controls. He's bloody and incapacitated. We never see what happens with him. And I just want to acknowledge, like, here is somebody who works in public transit, is probably meant to be keeping people safe on a daily basis. And he is directly impacted by this battle between Ultron and the Avengers. Whether or not the Avengers are responsible for it, I guess, is a question mark, but this person is still ultimately impacted. So pretty sad.
Well, I have my own thoughts on the public transit system within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's another good example of it just being used for destructive purposes, but there's no real outcome that's given to it of how that affects people's lives. And obviously this person that you're referring to, the conductor, that's obviously affected his life quite a bit. And I doubt he's going to be a conductor much longer. He might be looking for another job. But also speaking of things that really irk me, if we think back to the first Avengers movie, Amber, do you remember my conversation about the Galaga guy playing the video game in the background?
Yes.
What happens again in this movie? Because it's another Avengers movie, so it's the second Avengers movie, same director, Joss Whedon. And I don't know what it is, but he has this same joke he's doing again. And this time, it's at the end of the movie. There's a police station in Sokovia, and the Pietro character is running around, warning people, whatnot. He goes to the police station. It's like, you gotta, help, get everybody out of town. And he leaves, and then he has to come back and no, it's like something's happening.
No one does anything. They're like, whatever.
And he's kind of a little bit in the background of that scene, kind of coming in and out, telling people. But what's in the foreground, there's the guy working the front desk at the police station, and he's just playing solitaire on the computer. So Pietro comes in, he looks up and he stops playing solitaire, and Pietro leaves and he goes back to playing solitaire, and then Pietro comes back. So I don't know, he has some sort of thing that irks him to the director about people not doing their job and just messing around playing video games while they should be working. So it comes back again.
Well, speaking of moments we've seen before, did you notice our favorite computer analyst is back?
This is the one that kind of saves the day in Winter Soldier.
Yeah, he was my pick for having, the best apology. But he's back when Nick Fury comes with the helicarrier and Maria Hill to save the day and get the people off of the floating city in Sokovia. So nice to see that he's not only transitioned from on the ground computer analyst to traveling with the helicarrier, but he is still on board with S.H.I.E.L.D.'s mission and doing good in the world.
Yeah, he's got a promotion. He's moving up. He's doing good things, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a nice callback. I love that.
It's a good thing to see. Yeah. Yeah, so I have one more left, and that's the character. I think most people, I had to look it up too, that don't know the name of the character, but it's the woman in Sokovia with blonde hair that's just kind of randomly through the end of the movie keeps being in the foreground, and it's like, who is this person? Then ends up her brother runs off, and Pietro has to go and block Clint from getting shot and saves the day and ends up getting Pietro killed. Do you know who I'm referring to?
I do, yeah.
She never really thanks Pietro and Clint for saving her brother. I guess there's deleted scenes in there where they actually have more of a relationship. Pietro's kind of a love interest of her.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of a setup from the beginning of the movie that kind of shows that the Maximoff twins are kind of, or him is like stealing stuff and giving it away to the poor, kind of a Robin Hood kind of thing. So they actually have a relationship there, that's cut from the movie, but it doesn't mean, even if you don't know the person, I think you should say, thank you for, sacrificing your life there. So there's really no acknowledgement of the Pietro's sacrifice from said person.
I never would have guessed that based on what we saw that actually made it into the film. So that's pretty interesting. Well, I do want to make sure we mention the folks that are impacted in Johannesburg with the whole Hulk and Hulkbuster scene. You mentioned that before. There's just a ton of people impacted there. We have a high-rise building that's under construction that just crashes to the ground. We have those elevator occupants who were like both impacted by Hulk and Tony as Hulkbuster and then saved by Tony. And so there's just a ton of stuff that's going on there. And so we didn't talk a lot about Johannesburg. Just want to mention that.
Yeah, one of the interesting parts of that scene too, and I kind of think it shows some of the growth of these characters, is right before Tony destroys the building, he's trying to buy it.
Yeah.
How come he can't buy his building? So he's like acknowledging that he's affecting people and damaging lives and causing financial damage to people. So I think that was a good shout out by Tony to try to think ahead.
Yeah, he's definitely trying to do right by people this movie, even if he doesn't always get it right.
Correct.
And that's it for Damage Diary. A reminder that even when the world is saved, someone is left rebuilding cities, grieving losses, and living with consequences long after the superheroes move on.
Up next, our biggest takeaway, because beneath the destruction and the spectacle, Age of Ultron is wrestling with fear, responsibility, and what happens when our power outruns accountability.
Avengers Age of Ultron isn't really just about an AI uprising. It's about a group of people trying to outrun fear. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of the future, and fear of what happens if they stop being useful.
Tony tries to control the future before it can hurt him. Steve clings to principle because it's the only stated ground he has left. Bruce believes isolation is safer than connection. Natasha questions whether she even deserves a future outside the fight. And Clint deliberately chooses something to protect that isn't the mission.
Beneath the spectacle, this movie is asking what happens when responsibility turns into control and when good intentions replace listening, which brings us to our biggest takeaway. You don't need advanced tech or world-ending stakes to recognize a pattern. In real life, trouble often starts when we decide for others instead of talking with them, when fear makes us act first and explain later.
Growth doesn't look like having a perfect solution. It looks like slowing down enough to ask, am I protecting people or am I protecting myself? It's a meeting when certainty has become a shield and control has replaced trust.
Age of Ultron reminds us that accountability isn't about blame, it's about involvement. Let's let people share the weight, the decisions, and the consequences.
And that's the lesson we carry with us. You don't have to know how everything will turn out. You just have to be willing to invite someone else into the conversation.
And that brings us to the end of Avengers Age of Ultron. The world is technically saved, the team is changed forever, and the cost of unchecked power is finally impossible to ignore.
Today we tracked the damage, explored the missed apologies, and sat with the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the biggest disasters come from trying to fix things alone.
So we'll leave you with this. Where have you confused control for care? And what conversation might change things if you choose trust instead?
If you're enjoying this show, please follow us, leave a review, and share it with friends, family, and colleagues, or with someone you want to apologize.
Next time on Super Sorry, we're shrinking things down for Ant-Man, a story about a guy who just wants to do one good thing, even if it means breaking into impossible places and trusting the wrong people for the right reasons. It's where the most meaningful apology isn't about failure, it's about choosing to try again. Until then, I'm Amber.
I'm Todd.
And we are Super Sorry. Super Sorry is written and hosted by Amber and Todd. Produced by A Super Sorry LLC. Music by Jam Studio. Special thanks to MCU Wiki, Nerdist, and MCU Location Scout for serving as sources for Damage Diary. Your support helps us keep answering the hard questions and saying the hard apologies. Thanks for tuning in and sharing with friends. And if you're listening from Seoul, Johannesburg, or Sokovia, we are super sorry.
One last thing. Vision, Thor's hammer. When Vision picks up Thor's hammer, how is he able to do that? Is he pure of heart? Is he a good guy and he's worthy of picking up the hammer? Or is it the discussion that Iron Man was talking about? He's just a device. He's just an elevator and he's only can pick it up because he's strong enough mechanically to pick it up. For me, since we never see Vision conjure any lightning like Thor does with the hammer, I think he's more of an elevator. But also maybe he's worthy because he was created by Thor's lightning and that's why he's worthy, not an elevator.
Super Sorry is not affiliated with Marvel Entertainment, Marvel Studios, the Walt Disney Company, or Disney+. As of this recording, all Marvel characters mentioned in this podcast are the property of the Walt Disney Company.